Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Welcome back to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville government, politics, education, business, news, events, anything that gets our attention. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com. And I am joined, albeit virtually, because we are doing a Zoom taping of this week's episode, by my colleague, co-founder, and co-publisher, Scott Barker. Scott, how are you today?
I'm doing fine today, Jesse. We're in the middle of March Madness and getting ready to have the Big Ears Festival come to Knoxville. It's an exciting time.
Yes, you mentioned March Madness. We should probably say a little RIP or pour out a drink or something for the UT men's basketball team. We're taping this on Friday. They had a bit of a rough showing Thursday night, but they did make it to the Sweet 16. So, I think you got to call that a successful season. They had some obstacles to overcome.
Yeah, it was a great year for the Vols, and it was a shame that it ended the way it did. But there's only one of all of the teams in Division I basketball. They were one of the top 16. I mean, that's pretty good. Only one gets to win the whole championship. So
That's right. Well, and of course we do, at least as of this taping, we still have the Lady Vols in contention. So yes, everybody can shift their focus over there if they're not already focused. All right. Well, that's all the sports we are going to talk about this week, because Lord knows there are plenty of other places you can find better informed people to talk about sports. Unless, Scott, did you have another sports related thing you wanted to mention?
We will be talking about sports later on in the show, but briefly.
Oh, well, right, yes, but from the sort of governmental administrative side, as opposed to we're not doing any play-by-play.
That is correct.
We will, however, be doing plenty of color commentary on local and state government. We're going to get some updates on city council races, race in particular, city council election, the structure of those, a little bit of back and forth between our council and state legislature. School vouchers, are they coming to Knox County? We're also going to talk about Knoxville's new upcoming real-time crime center. And to get us started, we're going to talk about Knox County Commission, which met for their monthly work session last Monday. And so this is something we've talked about before. Commissioner Dacia Lundy brought a resolution seeking to subpoena Sheriff Tom Spangler and several members of his staff and administration to get to the bottom of this incident that happened at McAllister's Deli back in November. We have talked about this. Basically, there were 3 sheriff's deputies who said they were denied service at a McAllister's Deli on Shad Road. Then Kimberly Glenn, the communications director for the sheriff's office, put that out on social media, apparently without contacting or talking to anybody at the store, or really getting the details of the situation. And all of this culminated eventually in a 15-year-old girl losing her job at McAllister's, even though she says she did not, in fact, deny service to anybody. And this was given added attention and weight in the community for a couple of reasons. One is that she is Black, and the officers involved here were white, and so it's kind of a racial dimension to this interaction. But then secondly, she turned out to be, totally coincidentally, as far as anybody can tell, the sister of Anthony Thompson Jr., who was killed in a confrontation with police in a bathroom at Austin East High School in 2021. And so Commissioner Lundy, who has been supportive of the girl, her name is Anaya Thompson, has been trying to get answers from the sheriff's office about this now for however many months it's been, since November, 4 or 5 months, and has been frustrated in that effort. And she had asked the sheriff to just come to council or commission and talk about this back in January, which, by the way, is not an unusual request. In fact, the sheriff often attends county commission meetings and will typically answer questions that are put to him by county commission. He refused. He said he wasn't going to come. He wasn't going to answer her questions. He wasn't going to make his staff available to answer her questions. Just turned her down flat. So she attempted to bring subpoenas, which she felt was the only other kind of legal avenue or option she had here to try to get answers from the sheriff's office. However, and commission does have subpoena powers under the county charter. They don't use them often. I don't know of a time that they've been used. I can't remember ever seeing it done. And it takes a 2/3 vote of commission. So Lundy knew that this was going to be a bit of a challenge, I think. She's the only Black member of commission. She's one of just 2 Democrats on commission, so she kind of starts having a bit of a political disadvantage there. A lot of commissioners tend to be very supportive, at least publicly, of law enforcement in the sheriff's office. Talk about that little caveat I just gave there publicly in a minute or two. But basically, she brought this and completely failed. The only other commissioner who voted in favor of the subpoenas was Commissioner Courtney Durrett, who is the commission chair and is also the only other Democrat on the commission. The 9 Republicans all voted against it. And not only that, but nobody said a word about it. She kind of made one more impassioned plea for this. There were some members of the public who came and spoke and talked about, why they thought that commission should seek answers to these questions from the sheriff's office. But none of the other commissioners said anything. They just voted it down, and that was the end of it. Functionally, it was a work session, but and in work sessions, they don't typically. That's not where you take the official vote on things. But Lundy made a motion to send it to this coming Monday's commission meeting with a recommendation for approval. And so when you do that, if it fails at the work session, then it means that it just doesn't go forward. So that item will not actually come up for discussion at Monday's commission meeting. It's basically dead. So, on the one hand, Scott, I didn't find the outcome really surprising. On the other hand, it did seem sort of notable that, after kind of months of Lundy trying to push this into, the foreground and persuade her fellow commissioners that this was at least worth talking about, that basically nobody said a word about it at all.
Yeah, it's really, it's not surprising that Spangler refuses to talk about it. He is an independent office holder. He is not accountable to county commission for his actions. However, by not talking about this, we've been talking about it in the media, have been talking about this for months. And this is something that could have been dealt with and forgotten about almost. I mean, I don't want to say forgotten about, but it could have been resolved months ago if he had come forward and said something. And so it's really kind of interesting that that the sheriff of Knox County has allowed this to keep going, to perpetuate, as it would be easy to just stop it. Without the stonewalling, that's one of the things that being being transparent and open often is a more effective tool to keep issues from growing than stonewalling. And
especially when you consider that it was the sheriff's office itself that created this situation in the first place. They're the ones who put this on social media. They're the ones that created a backlash against this McAllister's location that then eventually led to Anaya Thompson being fired. McAllister said they did not fire her because of the incident itself, but because as a result of all this talk, they discovered she's only 15. They say they only hire people who are 16 or older. She says she put her age on her job application and nobody made an issue of it. So, I guess you can take that for what it's worth, but that was the explanation the company gave. But it's pretty clear that none of this would have come to anybody's attention at all. It was entirely an event created by the sheriff's office that then, having created it and pushed it out into public view, essentially walked away from it and has refused to answer any questions about it since basically the day after it happened. And you talk about keeping stories alive. When I worked for the city in public information, one of the guiding principles there, and I think this is a common thing for people in those kinds of jobs, was don't turn a one-day story into a 3-day story, or don't turn a one-day story into a 2-week story. Get everything out as quick as you can. Of course, you're going to kind of present things in the light most flattering to your side of the story, but still, figure out how to deal with it. And the sheriff's office, in addition to having created this in the first place, then by virtue of not answering questions, not talking about it, has turned it into a 4 or 5 month story. But I also think that this is another illustration. As you say, the sheriff's office, the sheriff is independently elected. County commission does approve the sheriff's budget each year, but they don't have a lot of, they could change that number if they wanted to. They don't have any direct control over how he runs the operation, what policies he sets, how he manages his staff. None of that. County commission just does not have any oversight of any of that with the sheriff's office. And Scott, we do have a tradition in Knox County of Knox County sheriffs just stonewalling and refusing to answer questions. This isn't new behavior from not just Sheriff Spangler, but from basically anybody that you and I have seen in that office over the years. It's just kind of how they operate.
I was a law enforcement reporter for the News Sentinel when Jim Hutchison was the sheriff, and he did not talk to us. He just
like as a policy. He just refused.
Yeah, just refused to talk to the News Sentinel, and and it led to some weird stories that we would publish. Remember one time there was we were doing a story on, it's too involved to go into here, but we were working a story on his vacation home in Sevier County, and he thought we were doing a story because they wouldn't answer directly our questions. He thought we were doing a story on his vacation home in Sevier County. Mm-hmm. But what we were doing a story on was these vacation homes in the same development, which was his development, and next to his, that were all of his political cronies developing building their vacation homes up there. Mm-hmm. It was kind of an enclave of law enforcement vacation homes, and that's what the story was. But because they wouldn't respond to us, they didn't respond to that. They just said, "Oh well, he's got a vacation home up there, so what?" well, that's not, and then they wouldn't, go into anything else. So, yeah, the sheriffs have a way of, they're insulated because they don't have any, the only check on a sheriff is an election every 4 years. That's it.
Yep. Unless a sheriff does something so egregious that they end up indicted, which
yeah.
has also happened, not recently, but certainly that is before. Remember this, before we had term limits for the sheriff as well as other offices in Knox County. Remember, there was a line that Tennessee sheriffs only ever left office two ways: either dead or in handcuffs. Basically, once they got into office, it was very, very hard for anybody to ever dislodge them. And, I did ask after this meeting this week, I went up and talked to a couple of the county commissioners, the two at-large commissioners, Larson J. and Kim Frazier, because they represent the whole county. And I just said, well, what, they both said that they didn't think a subpoena was the proper way to deal with this whole situation, that wasn't an appropriate use of commission's power. And I said, okay, well, so what should people do? If you have a complaint with the city, with the Knoxville Police Department, you have some avenues. First of all, there is a police advisory review committee that has some independent power to do its own investigations. If you want to complain about something to do with the police department, you don't have to go to the police department. You can go to PARC, an independent agency, and file your complaint there. You can also complain to the police department, of course, but a lot of people are more comfortable not complaining directly to the department that they have a complaint with. And there's a whole avenue there. They can conduct their own investigation. Plus also, of course, the police chief and everybody in the department ultimately also answers to the city mayor. And so you have an avenue through the mayor's office. Of course, with the sheriff's office, you have none of those things. There is no independent oversight of any kind. And then also, he doesn't have a boss. He doesn't report to anybody except, as you say, the voters. And so that was my question to Jay and Frazier was, what should people do? If you have a bad experience with the sheriff's office, and let's be clear, people have bad experiences with the sheriff's office. What should you do? Who do you talk to? There is a complaint form on the sheriff's office website, but again, you're complaining to the exact department that you're complaining about. A lot of people may not be comfortable with that for fear of retaliation. There's all sorts of things that could come in there. And so, they didn't have really strong answers about that. I mean, ultimately, of course, you can always file a lawsuit if you think something has been so egregious. But if you look at this case with Anaya Thompson, my sense is that what she was really looking for here was just an apology. Somebody looking at the situation and saying, well, maybe we could have handled this differently and we're sorry. She's not going to sue them. I mean, maybe there would be some, well, I shouldn't say she's not going to sue them. I don't know. I guess she could. There may be some theoretical cause of action there, but probably not. It's not really a lawsuit situation, but it is a situation that probably happens much more often, which is just feeling like an officer was a jerk to you. And that happens with KPD too. The most common complaints that come to the Knoxville Police Department have to do with people saying they thought an officer was a jerk to them. Those are the complaints that most often, PARC goes and looks at. If you have that experience in the county, again, you just don't really have those avenues of recourse. Now, Kim Frazier did say that she is researching, and anybody who knows Commissioner Frazier knows she's somebody who does a lot of homework on pretty much everything she does. It's one of her hallmarks. And so she's researching this whole issue of police oversight and is potentially open herself, at least she said, to looking at some kind of, outside body or place where people could maybe take concerns. Of course, even if, and Commissioner Lundy has also said that that's something she's interested in. But again, to create anything like that would take certainly a majority of county commissioners and would probably be fiercely opposed by the sheriff's office, because law enforcement agencies universally always 100% If there's an exception, I'd like to hear about it. They always resist anything like this being put in place. So it might be hard to get to 6 commissioners who were willing to do that if the sheriff's office really fought it. So I don't know. I don't know if there will be further discussion of this case. I don't know if the discussion that came out of it will lead to more discussion of that kind of thing. But I do think that even just leaving aside the details of that interaction at McAllister's Deli, it just illustrated again how hard it is for anybody, reporters, county commissioners, citizens of Knox County, to hold the sheriff's office accountable. It's just very, very difficult to do.
Yeah, it is, but again, I keep going back to this. They could have diffused it so easily.
Yeah.
I mean, even if they had said, whether they believe it or not, hey, we're sorry it happened. We shouldn't have. We shouldn't have posted something on social media to bring this up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, that would have pretty much ended the thing. And saying that you shouldn't have posted something on social media isn't the same as, we shouldn't have enforced the law. It was a pure PR thing. And they could, they could take that little hit, no big deal. And everybody would have moved on. And like we said earlier, this would have been a story that lasted a couple of days and not one that's dragged on for months.
Well, and potentially they could have even spun it into something, more positive. Lundy says that her initial interactions with the sheriff after the incident happened were just her reaching out to him and kind of saying, I feel bad about this incident and then that this girl ended up losing her job. Basically, is there anything that we as the county, as the sheriff's office, as county commission, is there anything we can do, for her, maybe try to help her find a job somewhere, or just something like she didn't have a really specific idea about it, she said, but she just was hoping that there might be some talk about, is there a way to make this better somehow? And the response that she said she got from the sheriff, and she read his text message during the meeting, was he started out the text message by saying, the best thing for all of us to do is just let it lie. Basically just telling her, walk away and forget about it. Yeah. Obviously, she didn't do that, so we've had several months of discussion, but it's still kind of in the same place it is. So I don't know if more will happen there. Certainly, we will talk about it if it does, but it has been an interesting incident. Yes. Okay, well, so sticking with law enforcement, but from a completely different dimension, City Council this week talked about a new law enforcement amenity. I don't know what you might call it. What's going on with our real-time information center?
Yeah, what this is, they used to call it the real-time crime center. Mm-hmm. Now they're calling it the real-time information center. I don't know. I'm sure there's a PR reason for that, but whatever. And what it is the Knoxville Police Department is wanting to put together a network of cameras in the city, basically surveillance cameras, but in public, not in private, but in public, and with video feeds into this center that's going to be in the public safety building or complex, and KPD employees will be able to monitor those video feeds. They will be able to, in some cases, they might be able to see a crime being committed and dispatch officers immediately. Usually it's after the fact where they find, oh, well, a crime happened here. The suspect vehicle is on this camera at this time, and it's on that camera at that time. But it's a time or a way for them to review video to address crime. And Lots of other cities have these systems. Chattanooga has one. New Orleans, where Chief Paul Noel came from, has one. Memphis has one. So a lot of cities do this, and the contract that the city council approved last week was just for the build out of the area. It was for drywall and flooring and windows and that kind of thing. Not really the technology behind it, but the discussion at city council ended up being, okay, what is the purpose of this? This center. What's it going to do? And Chief Noel, pointed out that what it does is it helps them basically compile evidence that they can use. One of the big complaints, or not complaints, big points of contention was identifying people through these videos, because some videos you can't really tell who's who, that sort of thing. The Amelia Parker and Seema Singh were the two council members who were most concerned about this, being able to using these identifications as a pretext for arrests. Noel said, of course, that if they identify somebody through a video feed, that's just one part of it, and they have to do more investigation to, that's not enough in and of itself to give a warrant. So that's been going on. But the one thing is that this is showing that technology is probably ahead of where we like to think of ourselves being in in criminal justice. I think that one thing that that is important to note is the city's going to start this with 15 cameras that are city owned, put in high crime areas. And one thing that people don't get is that when you're in public, you have no expectation of privacy. If you're in public, people can take pictures of you without your consent, and they can take video of you without your consent. And so, it's and they're just taking advantage of that as a law enforcement tool.
Yeah, that's something that we as reporters certainly sometimes run into. You'll be out there taking pictures of a building or even a person at a public event or rally or whatever, and somebody will come over and be like, "What are you doing? Why are you taking pictures?" Or, "You don't have my consent." And you have to nicely say, "Well, you're in public, and anybody in public, as you say, is there's a lot of court precedent to support this." You can be filmed, you can be photographed, you can be recorded if you're in public. Yeah, and that can be done by a private citizen or by the police department.
Yeah, did a story a couple of years ago when the scooters were first coming out, and got out and took a couple of photos of these guys on scooters going by, and one of them got really angry with me and started coming my way that he did not give me consent. I'm going, "Hey, you're in public. Sorry, And I jumped in my car real fast and drove away. But anyway, because at heart I'm a chicken. Anyway, but they do, there are concerns that that there could be shortcuts, and I think that.
Well, I think the kind of big brotherness of it, right? That's the
Yeah.
thing that kind of makes people nervous. This idea that the government has cameras, which of course, I mean, our governments have had cameras of various kinds for years, especially outside or inside public facilities. But that's the thing that makes people nervous, right? It's just kind of this general sense of constantly being under surveillance.
Yeah, it sure is. And one of the one of the features of this program is going to be that there are camera networks from other organizations, not just the city of Knoxville, that could feed into this real-time information center. And one obvious example is KCDC. They have, they manage the public housing projects in all the city, and they have video cameras, and you can do that. UT is another. There are private companies that could do that. I mean, one of the hotspots for vehicular theft is West Town Mall. And they may want to put theirs into the feed, and that's fine. According to KPD, the images have to be clear enough so that have to be, so they have to be high quality cameras, and they have to be compatible with KPD's system. So and one of the things, I mean, there are technical leaps that have to be made. KCDC's systems are typically too fuzzy and grainy to be much good, and so they would have to upgrade their cameras to be compatible with KPD's system. So there's a lot of this is just dependent on technology and and what these agencies and organizations are willing to spend. But it will be more than just the 15 city-owned cameras involved here.
And so council, they had already funded this, right? But they basically they approved that it could go forward. Yeah,
they approved the contract. They'd approved they'd set aside the money. Mm-hmm. That's what budgeting is. Budgeting is setting aside money. And they'd set aside the money already. This is actually spending the money. They will be spending the money. They'll be doing that over the next few months. The one thing that isn't budgeted yet is the actual technology, the cameras, the video monitors, those kinds of things have not been budgeted yet. The center will require at least 3 non-sworn personnel to staff it. So none of that's been budgeted yet. That'll be in next year's budget, and so we've got the $1 million spent now. But there's going to be a lot more spent in the coming years.
Sure. All right. Well, it'll be interesting once it's up and running. Hopefully, maybe you can get a visit and a tour and kind of see what's going on there at Big Brother Central.
I actually saw I was over there the other day and actually saw the raw, basically blank footprint of the center. It's not really as large as you think it might be. I mean, given the the mission it has, but I'm certainly once they move forward with it, I'll definitely see if they will give me a tour and see exactly how it works.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's turn our attention now to a couple of items related to the state legislature. We talked about the state legislature a lot last week. We're not going to talk about them quite as much this week, but there were still a couple of interesting developments. The first is having to do with school vouchers. And what came out this week is that school vouchers might be coming to Knox County. Governor Bill Lee created the Education Savings Account program in his first year in office in 2019. And it was very hard to get it through the legislature at the time. It sort of barely squeaked through the House of Representatives. People may remember that our own local representative, Jason Zachary, was the tipping point vote there. And at the time, both Zachary and also many of the other Republicans who voted in favor of this voucher program said they were only in favor of it if it didn't affect their districts, their local school districts. And so the program that was created only affects currently, it's only available to students in Nashville and Shelby County, Nashville and Memphis, basically. And those two cities sued, saying that they thought the legislation was unconstitutional because it did single them out. It took a while for that to work through the court system. And so it was only last summer that the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the governor, said, no, the way the program is set up is constitutional, it can go forward. And so this, our current year, is actually the first year that those vouchers have been available in Nashville and Memphis. They have about 640, 650 families currently signed up there. So it's very much in its early stages. The state has said it would like to, as an initial step, get that up to about 5,000 students. And so this year, there had been a proposal already in the works to expand it to Hamilton County, Chattanooga. And then just this past week, that bill has already passed the state Senate. And the bill that passed the state Senate only applied to Chattanooga. Knox County was still not part of it. But an amendment that was filed in the state House this past week, and which will be heard in committee probably this coming week, adds Knox County to it. Now, if you read the actual bill, it doesn't say Knox County. It doesn't say Hamilton County. And there's a lot of legislation that ends up being written this way. Again, this has partly to do with that kind of constitutional limitation. The state can't just randomly pass laws that only apply in like one county or one city. They have to have a rationale for doing it. And so the way this one's written is, I think it applies to any school system that had at least 3 schools on the state priority list in 2015, and also 3 schools in the bottom 10% statewide in 2017, which feel like very random and arbitrary metrics, you know. But the reason they did that is that if you do that, it turns out that the 4 districts that end up being affected by that are Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. So this would now it would expand that voucher program to the 4 big cities. It has not yet been discussed in the legislature since Knox County was added into it, but it's interesting to note that all of the Republican members of the state House delegation from Knox County signed on to this amended version of the bill as co-sponsors, including Jason Zachary. And so where they're, you know, it shows you how quickly this issue has evolved, which has a lot to do with kind of national and state level shifts in the Republican Party and other things we don't have time to get into here. But something that was very hard to get even a majority of Republicans to go along with just 4 years ago. Now, all of the Knox County Republicans have signed on to it and said, yes, this is great, basically, or presumably that's what they think. They've signed on as co-sponsors. I did reach out to Zachary for a comment. Haven't heard back from him yet about, you know, what seems to be kind of a shift in his own thinking about it. But this could take effect this fall in Knox County. And there's certain metrics. It's for people, you have to be below certain income levels. It's basically double the federal free lunch standard, which I think for a family of 4 right now would be families making up to $78,000 a year family income would be eligible. So we've already been talking about a new charter school that's probably coming. It's going to be discussed at next month's school board meeting, but it's likely, I would say, that they're going to approve that application. That's the recommendation. That would open in 2024. But even before we get there, we may have school vouchers in Knox County, which would be a brand new thing. We've never had anything like this, where basically families at that income level could withdraw their child from Knox County schools and essentially get a check from the state for about $8,200 right now that they could use for private school tuition, or if they're homeschoolers, they could use for educational materials. It's basically a step toward really opening up the school system to something that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, and one of the things that is interesting about this is the dollar amount of the voucher is lower than a lot of tuitions for private schools, and it kind of leads you to wonder. And I'm trying to serve this up to you as a really softball thing here. It leads you to wonder, is this a way to get middle class parents to get their kids into private schools that they could not otherwise afford, more than getting low income parents getting their kids into the school? Because if you've only got $8,000, you can't get into web. Sorry.
Right.
You can't do it. But there are families that could, with an $8,000 bump, get their kids into web. So, I mean, is that a factor here?
Yeah, I think that's certainly one possible impact. I mean, you can imagine lots of possible impacts here. You could also see, we're already seeing a growth in charter schools. You could see a growth in new private schools, especially religious schools, because religious schools are eligible for the vouchers. They do have to meet certain academic standards. Not just any religious school can do it, but religious schools are eligible. So you could see people opening new private schools specifically geared toward whatever that dollar amount is that parents will have to pay. The other thing, of course, that could happen is the program could be expanded. And there's already been a bill this year that I don't think anybody expects to actually pass this year, but to expand the program statewide, make it available in every county, everywhere. But you could also, so it could be expanded statewide. They could also eventually just remove that income qualification and say it's just open to anybody, in which case people who are already sending their kids to, say, web or someplace else could be eligible to basically just have a check show up that helps them to pay for what they're already paying for. I don't think that particular idea would be super popular at the front end, which I think is why they've structured it as, well, it's income qualified, so it's only people up to what is basically a middle class household income. But once you've already kind of gotten to there, it's certainly conceivable that in the future there'd be, just kind of throw it open, and then you would literally be taking taxpayer money and just sending it to people who are already don't have their kids in public schools, and it would just be kind of like a rebate on their private school tuition to them. All of those things are possible. We don't know. We'll have to see. It does have to get through this House Education Committee next week, and so we'll certainly be watching that and see what happens. But could be a big change. And of course, there's a lot of people who have concerns about vouchers. People in the school system who have concerns about it. Supporters of public education who have concerns about it diverting funds. On the other hand, there are no doubt parents out there who would look at this as a real benefit to them, and that it could help them with their specific needs for their specific kids. So I guess we will just see what happens. Another bill, which we have also talked about, has to do with Knoxville City Council elections. Knoxville City Council doesn't like this bill. What did they do this past week?
To say that Knoxville City Council doesn't like this bill is a horrendous understatement. This bill, as you said, we talked about it before. It would prevent or it would force a change in the way that the city of Knoxville does its elections for district representatives on city council. Currently, in district seats, you have a primary, and the primary, any number of people running. The primary, the voters within the district vote in the primary. Top 2 vote getters go to the general election. In the general election, everybody citywide votes. So it's not just the district representatives. So that's the way we do it now. The bill would prevent the city from doing that in the future. So, that's the main thing. Elaine Davis, who is a newly elected Republican representative in the 18th district in Knox County, championed that in the House. She carried that bill. It passed in the House very easily. In the Senate, State Senator Richard Briggs was the sponsor, but he said that he would only move it forward if the current system was unconstitutional. And so he actually put it into a subcommittee where bills go to die. A couple weeks ago.
He wasn't going to push it this year.
No. He and then, in a strange twist of fate, Frank Nicely, who is a senator who represents, he's from Strawberry Plains, and is outside of Knox County, much less the city of Knoxville, picked up the bill, and he's going to move it forward. So it's passed in the House, moving forward in the Senate, but City Council met to unanimously oppose this legislation. And one of the themes they kept hitting on is the city is governed under a home rule charter, and we should be able to control how we conduct our local elections. And that was the key theme that they kept hammering on over and over and over again on Tuesday when they considered this. And really, there was unanimous support for that. There was support from all council members. There was support from the public who spoke. No one in public spoke out against it. From the general public. So Theodis Robinson, who was the first African American city council member, spoke out for Knoxville having its having control over how it does its elections. And so it was really interesting. The only it wasn't even a dissenting voice. It was a cautionary voice from Councilwoman Amelia Parker, who said, "Well, home rule is good as long as you make sure you preserve the rights of civil rights and of the citizens." And yes, I think everyone would agree with that. But really, it was they were united in opposition to this bill. But we are dealing with a state legislature that has no qualms with preempting local initiatives. So they're doing that
for sure.
They're doing that in Nashville on multiple fronts. I mean, they just passed legislation to reduce the size of the Metro Nashville Council from 40 to 20 members. And they've got other bills in there directly addressing Nashville. And so, we'll see. I don't know. It still has to get out of the State and Local Government Committee in the Senate. And Briggs, who isn't real keen on the bill, is still the chair of that committee and can, be a persuasive voice. But it'll be, it'll all come to a head next week.
All right. And just an asterisk there on Theodis Robinson. I think we should say he was the first Black council member post-segregation. I think he was the first one.
Sorry, yes.
Since 1912. So, and if anybody wants to know, like, what did Jim Crow do in Knoxville? Well, we had aldermen, members of council, the name of the body shifted a couple of times there. But in the 1880s up until 1912, there were some Black office holders in Knoxville. And then after 1912, that just completely stopped for basically 50 years. And Robinson, Theodis Robinson, was actually elected in the very first election that used this system, where you have in 1969, where you have the district level primary and then the citywide voting. So I guess whether on the one hand, I thought it was interesting. Councilmember Tommy Smith said he was concerned that if the general election is just in the district, that's a lot less territory to cover, and therefore it makes it less expensive to run a campaign. And so his argument was that was potentially bad because it made it easier for outside groups, which we have seen in some local elections recently, where outside groups put money in, and you get swamped with mailers and other things that an outside group that only had to focus on one district wouldn't have to spend very much money to have a big impact. On the other hand, I think one question about the current system, and a challenge that it does potentially present to candidates, is it is in fact pretty expensive to run citywide. And so if you only had to run within the district, both in the primary and the general, yes, it could make it easier for outside groups to influence it, but also, maybe it could make it easier for somebody who can't raise $40,000 or whatever to run, because again, you would just be focused in that one small area.
That's one of the issues Amelia Parker raised, is that there are people who might live in a district who are well known in the district, well regarded in the district, who would want to run in the district and would do well in the district, but they aren't as well known outside the district, and they're not as well connected outside the district, and they might not run because they don't want to run citywide, and they don't want to spend all that money. It is much more expensive. So that is one argument against what the current city arrangement is. The Tommy Smith also mentioned the good thing about that is that council members are forced to go out into other parts of the city to solicit votes and to find out what the issues are there, so that for instance, he is from South Knoxville. This has forced him to go to West Knoxville, to North Knoxville, and to find out what the concerns are up there, so that when he votes on matters that affect those residents, he at least has some context to build on, and he's got contacts to talk to. That's one of the things is when you're state like Tennessee, where we've got a sunshine law where you can't, Tommy Smith wouldn't be able to pick up the phone and call Lauren Ryder about an issue in Fountain City and talk about it. But if he already has his own contacts in Fountain City from campaigning in Fountain City, then he can find out from them on the ground, kind of, so there are good arguments on both sides of this.
Well, and it definitely seemed that for city council members and the people from the public who spoke at the meeting, whatever people feel about the current system, they think that if there were going to be changes to it, those should come from city council. They should come from the voters. It would have to be a charter amendment. So it'd actually be the voters of the city of Knoxville themselves making that decision rather than the state legislature.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the bottom line is city council said, to the state legislature, we'll take care of our own elections. If we need to make a change, we'll make a change. And they talked about that, to some extent. But it needs to come from us, not from you.
All right. Well, speaking of city council elections, we do have council elections this year. This bill, if it passes, would only affect one of those, the 5th district race, because that's the only district level race on the ballot this year. The other 3 are at-large races, and there was some news this week in one of those races. What was that?
Well, that was City Council at-large District B. Janet Testerman, who is the incumbent, who won 4 years ago, has decided she is not going to run for re-election. She sent out an announcement on Tuesday of last week, said she would be focusing more on her day job, which is the CEO of Young Williams Animal Clinic. And so, and she would not be seeking re-election, which throws that seat completely wide open. And although we only have one candidate who's running for it, it's Debbie Helsley, who is she ran against Glenn Jacobs for Knox County mayor last year and lost, but she's running for this city council seat. She's the only other person who had, or shouldn't say the only other, because Janet never actually committed to running, but she's the only person committed to running for this seat. Now, that could change, because we have plenty of time. It's not until May that people would have to submit petitions, but it's very interesting, that Testerman did that. She's the the daughter of the late Kyle Testerman, who was a long time, was city mayor, very well known person and well remembered person, and she was elected, about 4 years ago, the first time she ran. Then she ran last year for the 18th district state house seat as a Republican and didn't win. And it's not clear. She didn't want to talk about anything more than just what her announcement said when I talked to her. Don't know how much, how that played into her decision. But she's not going to run for re-election. So we'll have one completely open seat in the election.
So there will definitely be at least one new person on city council in December when they're sworn in. We just won't know who that is for a little while. Yes. Debbie Helsley, as you say, ran against Mayor Jacobs and lost, but she did better countywide than I think a lot of people expected. And within city limits, running as a Democrat, she handily outpolled Jacobs within city limits. So if you just look at that election as like a city race, she has in a way already won one race with running citywide, which puts her you already have a lot of people in Knoxville who have voted for Debbie Helsley for one office, and so I think she's hoping that carries over into this race. And I think we talked about Testerman after she lost that Republican primary to Elaine Davis last year. One of the things we talked about is that she had to tack pretty far to the right in that Republican primary and stake out some positions. She and Davis kind of were arguing over who was the real conservative in a way that she didn't really have to do when she ran for the nonpartisan city council seat that she currently holds. And we did wonder whether that was going to be hard for her to then pivot back to run for re-election in the much more Democratic-leaning city, and whether that was going to, some of those positions she took in that Republican primary could come back to haunt her in a city race. So yes, we don't know for sure that was one of the factors, but I would say that it may have been.
Yeah, it could have been. There is there are a large number of city voters who really look at those kinds of things and say, well, when she ran the first time, and it was nonpartisan. Everybody knew she was a Republican anyway, but it was okay. But now she's staked out some positions that they disagree with, and can vote against her. So, I think there's something to that. I think that that would have made it very contentious with Helsley. I think Helsley would have attacked her for various stances that she made as a candidate for the state house, and I think that that she is a pragmatist, and she realized that, well, don't know if I want to go through this, and she decided not to go forward. And it's funny. It's one thing, her job is very demanding, her day job, one of the interesting things. This is really has nothing to do with her decision. But this is the first council that I can remember where everyone has a day job.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is retired. Most councils have at least a handful of members who are retired, who can spend 100% of their time on city council business. This council, no one is retired. Everyone has a day job, and everyone has to split their attention between their employer and the public. And so it's kind of interesting how that kind of works out.
Well, and as you say, this may or may not have been a factor, but if you just think about the campaign, for example, Testerman was looking at having to run a campaign while, of course, run a competitive race while also holding this very demanding day job.
Yeah.
Debbie Helsley is retired. Debbie Helsley retired last year, and so she will have all the time in the world to just focus on this campaign. And you said something about maybe she decided she didn't want to go through this. I do think also that we can't discount the impact, the psychological impact that it has on people of losing an election. And Testerman lost an election last year, a hard fought. She put a lot of time and effort into it in that Republican primary, and she lost. It's not fun. I don't care what anybody tells you. Nobody likes losing. You put yourself out there to the world, and they don't pick you. I think that is hard for people, and so I wouldn't also discount, the prospect of potentially running two races back to back 2 years in a row and losing both of them. That doesn't sound like a good time, no matter who you are.
No, it doesn't. And and yeah, you're right. I mean, one of the things is, she did put herself out there last year. And not only did people, vote for her opponent, but these were Republicans. She was a Republican. Her father was a Republican. She's an establishment Republican. And the Republicans did not vote for her. And so that had to have been, have some kind of impact on her. I haven't talked to her about that, so I can't say that it definitely did, but it could shadow her decision not to run this year for re-election for city council.
Sure. Well, obviously much more to come on the city council election front over the coming months, and we will be talking more about all of that. for the moment. Seth, why don't we go ahead and take a quick break here? Okay, we are back, and we are to the question and answer portion of our podcast. Every week, we invite our readers, our subscribers at Compass, to tell us what they would like to hear about on the podcast. We go on. We have a subscriber-only Facebook page, the Compass Colloquy, one of many amenities you too can receive as a Compass subscriber. Find information at CompassKnox.com. This week, one question that was submitted to us had to do with the Advance Knox project. We've talked about this before. Knox County is undergoing a major overhaul of its general plan, which kind of sets the vision for growth and development for the whole county. This has been going on for about a year now. And this coming week, they're going to have the third public input session. And basically, there's a series of meetings scheduled over the coming week. You can find all of those meetings at advanceknox.org. The first one is Monday, March 27th. They run all week. And there are 2 virtual meetings for anybody who can't make it to the physical meetings, which are kind of scattered at different schools and locations across the county. But this week's sessions are basically going to focus on transportation in particular. They had a first round in the fall of, actually their first round of public input was last spring, just kind of get people's general thoughts about the county, what they liked, what they didn't like, what kind of growth and development they would like to see. Last fall, the team that's working on this, the county's hired Kimley Horn, which is a national engineering firm, to kind of run this process for them. They presented some different models of growth, different kinds and different approaches to growth, and solicited feedback on that. This week's are all going to have to do with transportation, because in addition to updating that general plan, the county is also putting together really a comprehensive transportation plan to look at what kind of transportation infrastructure is needed to support future growth and development, and kind of what that might look like. And Scott, one question that we had about this was, how does this process compare to the Recode Knoxville process that the city went through a few years ago, which was a little bit different, right? Because that was a zoning update. This is a planning update.
Yeah, the difference is that Advance Knox is kind of a big picture view. We want this type of growth more or less here. We want to discourage it more or less there. Kind of just a big picture view of what the growth needs to be in Knox County. Recode Knoxville was a very specific, basically lot by lot look at zoning, specifically how what buildings can be built in particular areas and that sort of thing. So Recode was much more focused and detail oriented, whereas Advance Knox is more of a big picture thing. Where do we want development to be, and where do we want areas protected from development and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and I think that subsequent to Advance Knox being completed and the county commission adopting an updated plan, the county's plan is to then come back and go through something more like Recode Knox and kind of say, okay, here is this big picture that we've identified people's priorities. What do we need to do in our zoning code or maybe other codes as well within the county to make that happen, basically? And so I think there will be something like that recode process in the county, but first we're going to go through this big, kind of setting the goals and priorities session. One question that has come up relative to transportation, and I don't know if this is going to be any kind of option talked about in these meetings. I have not yet seen the materials that will be at these meetings, although certainly we will be talking about it in the coming week. But some people have expressed a desire to get access to public transit outside city limits, because this whole planning process is focused outside the city. It's the unincorporated areas of the county, because the city of Knoxville and the town of Farragut have their own plans. And, I think that's a challenge, right? To get public transit outside the city, because Knoxville Area Transit is a city agency and it's city funded, and they provide service within the city.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's it's the city transit system. It's not the city and county transit system. And Knoxville Area Transit is going through their own review. There is the reimagining CAT process, which is they're looking at the routes and the number of passengers and passenger feedback and rejiggering some of the routes, but they're all inside the city limits of Knoxville because it's a Knoxville agency. Now, there have been talks about extending it outside of Knox County, or outside of the city limits of Knoxville. But then you're going to have to get into who pays for that, and and how that goes, and that's going to be. One of the things that the finger annexations of the 1990s did was put most of the commercial areas inside the city limits. So buses can still go inside those and be fine. But it's just not going to. It's not very practical for CAT to extend outside the city limits. So there's, that would be a big, heavy lift if that were to be done.
Yeah, there was a period, I'm going to say 10 to 15 years ago, where there was an express bus that ran from a CAT bus that ran from Farragut to downtown basically and back. Kind of the idea was to have sort of a park and ride program. But the town of Farragut paid for that. And when the town of Farragut decided they didn't want to pay for it anymore, CAT said, okay, that was fun, but we're not going to keep doing it on our own dime. Obviously, if there were going to be any sort of transit options outside city limits, the county, somebody would have to come up with funding for that.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be one of the things that comes out of these meetings. We'll see. If these meetings identify a really strong interest in transit options in particular places, maybe that's something that county commissioner or the county mayor would look at. Who knows? But anyway, if you're interested in this process, again, you can find all that information and all of these upcoming meetings at advanceknox.org. And also, after these meetings, the information from them should be available online. And then I believe they will also be soliciting online feedback for people who weren't able to get to the meetings. So if you can't get to those meetings this week, keep watching that website at advanceknox.org, because there should be more information and opportunities for input there. All right, well, that kind of sets us up to look at the coming week. Obviously, the Advance Knox meetings are one thing that's happening in this coming week. County Commission will hold its monthly meeting on Monday at 5 p.m. in the main assembly room of the City County building. As we said earlier in the podcast, that issue, Commissioner Blendy's proposal to subpoena the sheriff's office, will not be up for discussion because they did not vote to move it forward to this meeting. So that's essentially off the table, although people can still come to public forum and talk about it if they want to. They will be talking about a new ordinance that is supposed to make it easier for the county to make sure that developers who agree to provide certain kinds of infrastructure in exchange for their developments being approved actually do those things, do the road widening or turn lanes or whatever it is that they're supposed to provide, because the county has been having some trouble with that. So that's one thing on the agenda. But overall, it's not, there's, apart from with that subpoena issue removed from the agenda, There's nothing on there that looks super controversial, but of course we will cover it and let you know what happens. And then Scott, on Tuesday, talked early in the podcast. Yes, we are going to talk about sports a little bit this week. The Sports Authority is meeting again.
Yes, the Sports Authority is meeting. They're meeting on Tuesday. But actually, not a lot of this is about sports. One of the things they're going to consider is they're going to talk about the $65 million bond issue that makes up the bulk of the public portion of the stadium budget. They're getting ready to issue those bonds, and so we've got there are interest rate fluctuations. There are all kinds of variables going on that. So they're going to talk about that, and they're also going to talk about disadvantaged business enterprises, which are minority, women, or veteran-owned businesses being involved in the stadium construction project. And we've reported this before, and we talked about it before. The goal was to have 17% of the budget, go to disadvantaged business enterprises. They hit 15% so far. They're still working on that, but they're gonna, they're out there. Most of the Sports Authority board members, expressed some disappointment in those numbers, and they would want more participation from those businesses. And so there's going to be a more detailed report to come out. And it's going to talk about also kind of what efforts they made to go out and recruit those kinds of contractors, those subcontractors. And, they've had to go outside of the Knoxville area because Knoxville just doesn't have a large number of qualified, minority women and veteran-owned contractors. So like that, the numbers aren't there. So,
Right.
And one of the issues that kind of kept that down was the delay, because, this was originally going to be pretty much done last spring. We're almost a year later, and, it was kind of delayed because of the rising materials costs. And a lot of these, a lot of contractors who would otherwise want to be involved had to take other jobs because they, they needed to, keep their workers employed. They needed to keep revenue coming in so they could take other jobs and might not be able to come back and work at the stadium. So, but anyway, they're going to talk about that. Otherwise, construction of the stadium is moving forward, and that's a done deal, and that's going to go forward. Also, later in the week on Thursday, there's going to be a city council workshop on missing middle housing. We talked about that too. This is housing that is duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, smaller apartment buildings, things that increase density without being, big apartment complexes, and incorporating those into the city's zoning ordinances is kind of the focus of this. And so they're going to, the council members are going to have a workshop on it to see, what their options are, and start exploring, possible zoning options on being able to encourage those kinds of developments in neighborhoods in certain circumstances, and in an effort to promote density without destroying the feel of single family neighborhoods.
And that is something that got talked about in that whole recode process. And they did actually make it easier to do some of those things in some places through that process.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they're interested in revisiting that.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that RECODE did is, it has provisions for accessory dwelling units, on city property, where if you have your house, and then you can build a little, small house behind your house and rent it out or do whatever you want to with it. Your in-laws can come and live there, whatever. But and they allowed that. That was pretty contentious. Mm-hmm. And then, but this would encourage more multifamily dwellings inside these these zones that are single family only. And so they're it can be done. It would have to be, there have to be some big changes to some of the zoning. It can be surgically done, where these are. And one of the things that we're looking at is allowing triplexes and fourplexes, within a certain radius of a commercial node, which by definition is already more dense than a single family neighborhood. But it would be more of a transition to single family only. So, but we'll see. They're going to have a workshop and they're going to talk about all the different options on Thursday.
All right. And I guess the other thing to mention this coming week, we will have coverage of, and I think we're probably both looking forward to just attending, is the Big Ears Festival is coming back this coming weekend. The annual music and affiliated arts festival that every year brings adventurous musicians and adventurous music fans from all over the world, really, to Knoxville. It's, even if you're not going to Big Ears, I would say it's a good weekend to just come downtown and hang out, because it's always kind of cool that, first of all, there's actually a fair amount of free programming around it that you can attend even if you're not going to the festival. But I always think it's cool just to be down there and see everybody arrive from points, unknown, and our whole downtown is kind of transformed by that every year.
Yeah, it's a really fun time. That's the a lot of it is because there are people from all over the world who are coming here. They're seeing Knoxville for the first time. But they're adventurous music lovers, like you say. There's the way the festival's set up is, you can't possibly see every show in the festival. There's just no way. So you create your own festival by picking and choosing which shows you go to at which venues at what time, and that's a lot of fun. And you can see some surprising things. You can see some old favorites, and it's just a real tangible celebration of what Knoxville's downtown is, and that's compact and very sociable and very very walkable, very inclusive. And so I think Big Ears is a fun time.
And I should give the disclaimer that my wife works for Big Ears. However, she's been working for Big Ears for a couple of years now. But I was a huge Big Ears fan before she worked for Big Ears. If she ever is not working for Big Ears, I will continue to be a big Big Ears fan. So my enthusiasm for it is not in any way influenced by that connection, although it is pretty cool that she works there. All right. Well, that's what we're going to be looking forward to next week. And who knows what else. We will be back to talk about all of those things and anything else that gets our attention. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Seth Barber, Barbarian Productions. Our theme music is by Will Wright. And we will talk to you next week.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.